Hey, morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our show. And this is Denis Magda, a community member of YugabyteDB and the head of developer relations. And I have a brilliant friend of mine, Franck, who is also the author and the co-host of the show. Franck, how are you doing today?
Good, and you? Hello, everybody. I don't know if people are connecting. Maybe on the chat they can say hello and maybe from which country they are, so that we have an idea if it's the morning, the evening, the night.
Exactly. And that's actually going to be our housekeeping procedure. We just want to make sure that folks, you can see us, you can hear us, and just let us know where you're from because I live in the United States, Frank lives in Europe, and we do believe that many of you also live on these continents, but also there are many people who use YugabyteDB and represent our community from 5 distant locations such as Asia, Australia, and South America. All right, we
See
have
already
Pete.
that Pete is there. Hello, Pete.
I bet that Frank, you know Pete, right?
Yeah, sure.
Tell us more about Pete. I think that he is one of the PostgreSQL community members and YugabyteDB members, right?
Yeah, and he was a lot also on Oracle conferences. I think he did conferences for years and years and years. And usually he goes to conferences on his motorbike.
That's excellent. That's wonderful. I mean, it should be a joyful experience, especially if you travel in Europe, right? Just from one location to another on your
Yeah,
bike.
and that's exactly the community spirit, because then he makes friends everywhere, and yeah.
Wonderful. All right, welcome, Pete. Thanks for coming. So let's get started, folks. We have a pretty packed agenda today, but the primary thing that you need to keep in mind that this live streaming show is for you. For you, those who are interested in YugabyteDB, those who use YugabyteDB, those who would like to expand their knowledge about distributed SQL and YugabyteDB. This is why every other Wednesday, once in 2 weeks, Frank and I, we will be doing live streaming. You can come to this show and you can challenge us with your questions, problems, etc. That's your opportunity to ask us directly how YugabyteDB works, how to solve your use case, etc., etc. But also we will come with our own agenda. If the time allows, we will follow this agenda. So, yeah, speaking about Pete, yeah, and his experience in driving to conferences. Yeah, conferences is an excuse. Yeah, sometimes we need to come up with excuses when it comes to our family. We need to explain our families or beloved ones or anybody else, like to our companies, that we want just to go to a conference, but in fact we want to take a ride. That's a good hint.
My family still don't understand if it's work or meeting friends, but it's basically both.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an opportunity for us to commit and to see our friends, right, who live in other places. And conferences is our an opportunity to meet, to shake hands, to give a shot, etc. All right. So this show, Frank, let's. As I said, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions to us. We can show you, we can run code, we can do live coding, but apart from that, you will be able to learn on what's new in YugabyteDB ecosystem, what's happening at conferences, because Frank and I, we meet a lot of community members worldwide, and sometimes we would, just show you a demo. Sometimes we would take a look at our new feature. Sometimes we can, just open one of the deep dive blogs by Frank, and we can just do a deep dive analysis of his article. It depends. It depends on our mood and depends on what you would like to hear. What's your thinking about this community open hours show, Frank? What motivated you and why you decided to join it as a host?
Mostly because it's another channel. We need many channels. People want to read blogs. People want to interact on the chat in Slack, but it's also this kind of open hours is kind of discussing and maybe getting questions in an easier way than just writing. We spend the day writing a lot on Slack, on WhatsApp, on everything.
All right, and at least you and I, right, will meet every other week live and discuss what's going on, because even though we are colleagues, we don't meet that frequently. We have our to-do list that we need to take care of, but that's at least an opportunity for us to meet with each other and with our broader community.
Yeah, that's right. And also bringing the feedback. We have different people in our personal Twitter or LinkedIn, and we have different feedback from different kind of people. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, why don't we move forward with our highlights section? So for the highlights, what we are going to do, folks, we are going to every time we will pick probably some of the news that we would like to share with you, and we will quickly discuss them, spending 10 or 15 minutes. So our highlights list for today consists of 3 items. First, we launched the PostgreSQL tips and tricks series. Franck will tell you more what this series is about, because he's the main contributor to this series. Then we also started producing short micro demos, YouTube demos for YugabyteDB managed. This is for those who would like to have a fully managed cloud experience for YugabyteDB. And, those are TikTok style videos. And finally, YugabyteDB 2.18 was released several weeks ago, and that's a massive release. We will not be able to cover all of the details, but we will review a couple of interesting features that Franck and I selected. So Franck, tell us more about your PG tips and tricks series.
Yeah, and I will share my screen to show it. But first, I will tell you where the idea came. We were discussing about our blog. I blog a lot on Dev2. I blog also on the Yugabyte blog. But the people coming there on the Yugabyte blog are mostly our customers or users who follow the blog. And the idea was also we also discuss a lot with Postgres users, even if they don't use Yugabyte or don't use yet or don't use for all of the applications. And then the idea was also to bring something to the Postgres community with kind of tips and tricks that we just have when we do something on Postgres or on Yugabyte or on the SQL layer. It's the same. We just have some shortcuts to do some stuff, and the idea is to share that there. And about sharing, I will share my screen, just checking how I will do that easily. My screen is there, so it's shared. Yeah, perfect. This is the blog, and we have a section category for this Postgres tips and trick. I think there are 3 there. There is one in draft for next week. And basically the idea was I very often create small demos and I need to generate some data for it. And it's easy to generate numbers with generate series. But in Postgres, there is nothing really handy to generate random strings. And the idea of the first one there was to show how I do it. Actually, I use the Aura FC extension because it emulates the function in Postgres in Oracle to do the same in Postgres. And also the last one was about indexing on JSON, because more and more people are putting some data in a JSON, some in relational columns and some in JSON. And we often have questions on Slack or by users, how should I index that for fast access? So this answer that. And next week will be also about indexing, but more indexing text. When we have a like, a query with a like, and we only know the beginning of the text or the end of the text.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I personally learn a lot from this series. And in addition, we are trying our best to create short videos for not, so right now we cannot keep up with Franck, because Franck here, he's like a machine. I think that he can easily compete with ChatGPT and producing very qualitative articles. And yeah, going forward also, like with every release, we will be releasing a micro video, so you can quickly watch what the article is about, and then you can do a deep dive and follow the instructions from the article. Yeah, and I mean, like RFC extension, man, it's it was very interesting, because when I checked the article, I was thinking that there would be some PostgreSQL built-in solution when you create, let's say, some function, etc. But then I realized, yeah, like you have a very deep knowledge of Oracle, and there is that extension that does much more than the generation of random strings. So
I can show the GitHub for this extension. It has a lot of functions. Basically, the goal of those functions was to emulate Oracle function for the people who migrate their application from Oracle to Postgres. So it implements the same kind. It also implements a dual table. And even when writing the blog post, I've opened 2 issues. Little things that I knew about, but never opened the issues. And finally, I did it while writing the blog, and they are already solved in the last version. So the contributors on this extension are really, really fast for that. Yeah.
Yeah, let me give me a second. Could you share the link to their PostgreSQL series in the comments, so that everyone?
Yes.
Yeah,
good
let's share it with the community.
I think if I put it there, it can be visible on all channels.
Exactly. You just did that. So folks, whether you're watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch, you will be able to see this link. Not on Twitter, but on Twitch. Yeah, and on Twitter we cannot post the links and comments directly.
I post also the link to the videos that you did, short videos about the same Postgres tips and tricks.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you. And we've got a quote and note from Pete. So indexing is important, but since YugabyteDB is hash-based, probably need to start with basic when hash index works and when range index is needed. Indexing of JSON content is step 2 in Pete's opinion. If to share my thoughts, I mean, yeah, it's like there are many indexes that are available, especially in PostgreSQL and YugabyteDB, and you need to pick your best indexing strategies. And when it comes to this article, at least Franck, correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose, even though Franck uses YugabyteDB as a reference platform in these articles, his goal also to show how to use this type of indexing in PostgreSQL. So that's why, like, if you just store a JSON column field in Postgres or YugabyteDB, and it comes with a lot of, how to call fields, right? JSON fields, and you want to index, just go ahead and index. Probably it's, I can tell a story. I sent a tweet about this story yesterday, actually, and we discussed it with you, Franck, because not everyone knows that PostgreSQL and YugabyteDB support JSON natively, and it's not just about storing raw JSON, right? You can store JSON in the binary format. We support indexes. You can do fast lookups. We have fast operators. And I had lunch with a friend of mine. He works in a big financial company, and he has an application. He needs to move this application from the private data center to their private environment in AWS. And right now the application uses MongoDB, and his IT team doesn't support Mongo in AWS yet. So they just use Mongo open source community edition, and this is what they do. And he said that basically it can take me month. It can take months before the IT team, let's say, establishes all their procedures, etc., and starts supporting Mongo there. Or they told me, we have Postgres, and you can use Postgres in AWS like today. And he says like, but I'm using Mongo. And my question was like, what Mongo has, like what exactly do you need from Mongo? And he said that, what Mongo, takes, just their user data in the JSON format and stores it as is in the database. And then it comes with wonderful operators that let me to quickly search through the data. And I told him, do you know that Postgres supports this natively as well? And he said, wow, that was an eye-opener for him, which means that we, as a community of the Yugabyte folks and Postgres folks, we need to do our best to tell the world that, JSON is also available in PostgreSQL. You can use it. And such articles will help to increase awareness.
So many people think that because there are a lot of new databases specialized for specific use cases or specific structures, people think that they need a new database for each different kind of data or structure. SQL databases can do everything, and there are some specialized databases to do something specialized, but yeah, the SQL databases have evolved during the years to have. I mean, when object was a trend, then all databases had object-oriented things in the database. When it was all about XML, then all databases implemented XML, and now it's JSON, and you can have full text search. You can have everything in a SQL database, and Postgres is so. Postgres has a lot also because it can have extensions. So when something is needed, people start to build an extension, and maybe it comes to the core.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the folks support us. MongoDB is just glorified JSON, but they actually Mongo as a company, they did a great job. Let's say they appealed to their web developers properly, and they truly, this is an example of the company and the product that took care of the developer experience seriously. And it's extremely easy to run Mongo and extremely easy to store your data as is in the JSON format, especially if you create web applications and then you query. It's just now they are reaping the crop, as we say, like you put your harvest, and right now you can benefit from this.
And Mongo did a lot for the developer experience at the time where SQL vendors were all like, no, you need to learn all SQL. You need to write SQL, not using ORMs. And that was not very developer friendly. So at that time, Mongo really listened to the users, and they did good for that. But for a specific use case, JSON, and without consistency, without ACID properties,
Yep. All right. Enough about Mongo, but we have a question from LinkedIn. This question is from Harmendra. Sorry, man, if I mispronounce your name. And we are copying the questions from LinkedIn. That's why you see them under the YugabyteDB, but this is how the streaming is set up. So, Frank, the question is for you. Can we take action based on specific field value change? I think the question is exactly about the JSON.
So specific value change. So in SQL databases, you have triggers. And so in Postgres, in Yugabyte, you have triggers on them. Yes, you can have triggers that read also the JSON attribute. I'm not sure if during data modeling, if there are some columns that are heavily updated, it's probably better to have them as relational columns. The JSON attribute is more for the many attributes that do not change a lot. Because if you change an attribute in JSON, then it will rewrite the JSON. So basically, yes, we can. But if there are attributes that change a lot, for example, a flag, yes, no, or something like that, I would put that as a column. The nice thing is that you don't have to choose all JSON or all relational. You can put some attributes, some information as columns, and others in JSON.
All right. Yeah, makes sense. But at least you have an option. All right,
Yeah,
let's move forward.
and I take those questions in my to-do list to blog about, because of course we can have triggers doing that, but maybe there are some tricky things to test. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, let's move forward. So the next highlight, and folks, we are quickly right now we are reviewing the highlights. We just talked about the PG tips and tricks series, and you can find the link to the blog post and to the YouTube series on YouTube, Twitch, or LinkedIn, whenever you're watching us. The next highlight is YugabyteDB Managed series. Now that's my turn to share the screen. So what we are doing, so YugabyteDB Managed is for those, let me do this. It's hard to, I cannot do multiple things at the same time. So when it comes to YugabyteDB Managed, this is a YouTube series. We are producing every week. We are producing a new micro video, like 1 minute and several seconds long, where we demonstrate some of the key capabilities of YugabyteDB. Let it be read replicas, geo-partitioning, how to take advantage of those capabilities using YugabyteDB Managed, which is a database as a service version for YugabyteDB, if you need it. All right, I'm just sharing the screen. So every week, and this week we are going to launch a new episode, and our goal is to produce around 20 episodes, and all of them are going to be available under this YugabyteDB Managed short tutorials playlist. Okay, sharing. Stop sharing, and getting back. Let me give you a link, folks. This is for the YugabyteDB Managed playlist short videos. Okay.
The managed service is as a free tier, and it's easy to start. I mean, if people want to understand the internals of Yugabyte, then better install it. But if you just want to play with it and run an application, the managed service makes it very easy.
Yeah, especially if you are going right to use it as a managed service. If you just want to experiment the first rise, you can use a sandbox version, or you can, what I usually do, if I want to have something geo-partitioned, or if I want to have a real cluster in a real cloud environment, I usually go to the Yugabyte Managed. If I want to do, some quick sample test, I usually go with Docker on my laptop.
Yeah.
Many options, right? So Franck, and the last highlight, YugabyteDB 2.18th release. Let's discuss it a little bit, because this was a big release.
Yeah, maybe I can explain the release number, and I will share my screen on my turn. I was just checking where is my screen. I will reshare it. Because in the documentation, of course, we explained that, but it's better, easier to go through that. Basically, for the moment, we use even and odd numbers to qualify the releases as preview and stable. So preview is really beta features. Preview, if you are doing development and you want to start to look at the new feature, preview is perfect. For production, of course, it's not a good idea to go on preview. You want something stable, and on stable versions, some are elected as long-term versions. So we are still in 2.14 for the long-term support version. So for those who cannot upgrade too often, we do everything to make it easy to upgrade, because we can do rolling upgrade. You don't have to stop the application, but yeah, it's always a decision. But we have also short support releases, and 2.18 is the latest one. So that is ready for production and stable, with a lot of features that we started to see on the preview, but now they are fully baked and also documented in the stable version.
Okay.
So maybe
all right. Yeah, that makes sense, because that's one of the first questions when people say, like, you released a version that looks like a production grade, like 2.17th, but should I take it to production environment? Usually our recommendation is that if that's an even version of the release, like 2.18th, yeah, take it to production. If it's 2.17th or like 2.15th, then it's for development purposes.
Yeah.
We just releasing new features to you. It's like in Java. I'm a Java guy, and Java right now releases a new version every 6 months. And some of the versions are they're fine. You can find to use them, but they just release them so that you can experience the new features ahead of time. And then some other release in the future, they would release those features in the production grade state.
Yeah, I can mention also that we have some beta features also in the production, but it's not enabled by default, and we will even make it more clear that it is beta by having a special flag to enable beta, to be sure that you do not enable beta feature in production. The funny thing is that we have some customers in production using features that are not yet generally available because the feature was built for their specific case and the support is aware of it. So those features can be used in production, but only on a specific context. So basically, in production, except if our support tells you that you can use it for this context, better not running in production anything beta, preview, and all that. Yeah. And yeah, there are a lot of features. Of course, there is a list of them, new features, all linked to the GitHub issue and commits that are there. So there is a lot. We will not look at that. I think we also have.
Yeah, there is a huge list. Let's show the highlights of that release. So there were some of the core database changes.
Yeah, we have also a blog post from Michael with the latest features. Maybe I can show you. So two important things. We have collocated tables. That's something that we had in preview for a long time, and now it is GA. The idea of collocated tables is that when you start to build a microservice on a distributed database like Yugabyte, you probably have a few tables and you want to distribute all of them. But we start to see more and more people moving from Postgres to Yugabyte or from other traditional databases like Oracle from Yugabyte. And they come with schemas with hundreds or thousands of tables. For example, we had a Temenos application. They have 50,000 tables. And of course, you don't want to distribute all those tables because this has an overhead. So usually those schemas have a lot of small or medium table, lookup tables, where you just want to collocate them because they will be joined. Those are all dimension hierarchies of dimensions that are joined together. So better to have all of them in one node. They will still be replicated, but basically we shard two tablets and those collocated tables will go to one tablet. So it makes it easy to start migrating from an application with a lot of tables.
Yeah, because I mean, if sorry for interrupting. That's especially because in YugabyteDB, as you say, like when we create a table, then we have our storage layer, DuckDB, and that on that storage layer for every shard or for every tablet, it's like a dedicated table, right, of RuxDB, which means that if you have a lot of small tables, that every small logical table will be split into multiple tablets. Multiple tablets is a dedicated RuxDB tablet, and you're just consuming a lot of resources. And that's a wonderful optimization for those if you want to save space, right, memory, etc., then just collocate.
Yeah, and yeah, because each tablet takes some memory, also CPU, because all tablets are really independent in their replication and their availability. So they send heartbeats. So it also uses, even if there is not a lot of operation on them, they still use a CPU, which is okay if you have 100 of them on a node, but 1,000 can be a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, do me a favor. Scroll down to the block. Let's get to those core. Yeah, you just talked about collocated tables, and folks, if you watch our YugabyteDB Friday Tech Talks, we have a dedicated stream on that. You can watch recording and query pushdowns. Can you demo them? Like, can you
just one word on collocated to make it easy? You can create a database with collocation equal true, and then all tables by default will be collocated. And you just define non-collocated for the specific table that you want to partition, just to make it easy, because if you have 1,000 of tables, you don't want to change the DDL for all of them. Yeah, about pushdowns, I think I will just show you a few examples. You can see my screen.
Yeah,
Maybe
let's go full screen
I will
and
make it a bit larger. And there are many things that we push down. The idea is that the architecture of Yugabyte is basically we have this distributed storage, and on top of it, we have Postgres. And that works quite well for OLTP, where we query a few rows. But if you are doing aggregates, if you are doing analytics, you don't want to retrieve all rows and then have the Postgres backend, a single process aggregating all that. So the idea of pushing down is that some SQL operations will be done on the storage itself. Because everything that is done on the SQL layer, it uses Postgres that is a single process per session, and when it is done on the storage, it is distributed on each tablet. So the first one, or probably the latest one that came, is about sequences. Let me create a sequence to see the difference. And I will mention cache 100. It is the default anyway, because we want to scale, and a sequence just generates incrementing numbers. And of course, the last number is stored in a table in one place. You don't want to hit this table each time you want a new number. So there is a cache that is per session, or we have also done that per server. So basically, I'm using a cache, and I will show the difference with the sequence push down or not. First, let me show you the few parameters that contains push in it. So the parameters that start with YB are the Yugabyte one, in addition to the Postgres one. And we have this YB enable sequence push down, and this is what I will show you. First, let me just generate some numbers. So I select next val from my sequence for 50,000 to get 50,000 numbers. So basically, getting 15,000 numbers with a cache at 100 means that I will hit the sequence, update the sequence 500 times. And I will run that in loops every seconds. And now I will show you on the console. So this is, can I put that just bigger? So this is my cluster, my test cluster. If I go to cluster and nodes, we see some basic information. If I refresh, basically the read operation and the write operation per node. This is a 3 nodes cluster. And the read and write operations are the operations sent from the SQL layer to the storage, reading and writing. So it's not each insert, because an insert can insert many rows and in a single operation. It's really the operations between those two layers. And basically here, you see, sorry, I refresh. Basically, you see 500 writes to one node. And that's exactly my sequence. The sequence sits only in one node. let me show. Yeah. And every second, I have 500 write. And this is with the optimization. Just to show you how it was working before, if I enable, sorry, not to on, to off, to disable the optimization. So what happened before this optimization, if I run the same again with a watch, and if I refresh there, so this is what we had. We had per second 500 reads and then 500 writes. Because if there is no optimization between those two layers, updating a sequence is getting the value and then updating with a +1 on it. And this can be still fast if it's just a question of millisecond because you are in the same region. But if you have a lot of activity, it's always easier to do single operations. So the push down is doing the read and the write in a single operation.
I mean, and this is why you need in the back of the days when I worked daily with the Apache Ignite community. That's a distributed database for in-memory computing. The ability to execute your logic, your computations, or your store procedures, right, on the database node side was a killer feature, because same as YugabyteDB, your nodes of Ignite are interconnected. That's a network. And the network at the slowest, it's your bottleneck. This is the slowest component, which means that the more optimizations you have that will minimize the network traffic between your application and database nodes, the better. And this is a beautiful example of how to do this with sequences, right? Sometimes you don't need to do reads, right? You just need to do writes and 500 times less operations.
And this came from a customer. The thing is that the cache, the cache is usually sufficient to not hit the sequence too often. But of course, because we do a distributed SQL database, we have users doing a very high rate of transactions and hitting the limit. And we want to remove every single point of contention. So this was one, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I can show you also another push down. Let me just quickly create a table, a demo table. I always call my demo tables as demo, where I have a timestamp and a number, and I will create an index on it. And I will explain, just to come back to the question that we have, this is a case where we need an ascending index. By default, we apply a hash function on the first value. Here, for this push down, I will explain why it can be done only with an ascending index. So here I have an index. I will insert some data. And with watch, I'm running that 10 times, so nine times. Maybe you don't know that this is a new feature in Postgres 16, where you can, before the watch was just running in a loop. Now you can define the number of iterations and the time between them. And I'm using the Postgres 16 beta client, the PSQL from there, just to make that. That's very very easy. And I think this patch was made with live coding on Postgres TV on YouTube. They do a lot of interesting discussions and things there. And then I wanted to show you select distinct. So here I have a table. I inserted 10 samples, so I have 10 distinct dates, but a lot of data in it. And doing a distinct on that without an optimization would have to read all the rows and then doing the deduplication in the SQL layer. Here, if I explain, analyze to see what happens, I can see that I have an index scan. So that's the index I've created. And I still see the deduplication on the Postgres layer. But here, the number of rows is 10, which is already deduplicated because each storage, each tablet has already applied the unique on it. So this decreases the number of rows that are sent from the storage tablets to the SQL layer.
Okay.
And
Okay.
again, as you mentioned, the network is can be the bottleneck if you query a lot of rows. Then you want to apply those kind of operation to push down those operations.
Just to remind those, I see that some of the folks are joining us right now, and Franck is demonstrating the query pushdowns feature that was released in the production grade in 2.18 of YugabyteDB. And this is an example of how the select distinct query can improve the performance by doing their, let's say, this distinct operation on their storage layer, right? You have the index that is ordered properly, and that's why when you run this query, you don't need to move data from the storage layer to the query layer, basically PostgreSQL, right? You can do a lot of calculations on the storage layer, and then you're just returning 10 rows to Postgres, and Postgres layer basically, just quickly make sure that all of those rows are unique.
And that done on the storage is also very fast because we store indexes. We have a kind of loose index scan where it just skips in the index. We have the index that is sorted on the value where we want the distinct. But even on the storage, it doesn't have to read all of them. It reads one and then it skips to the next value. So that's really efficient and fast.
And Franck, we've got a question from Ashwar from LinkedIn. So let me read it loud. Dear sir, in that sequence, we have created one column and 50,000 rows. It's okay, but if you want to create the number of columns and rows as per this, so then how can we create it?
If we want to create the number of columns and rows as per this, so creating thousands of columns, I don't really get the question.
I mean, and probably the question is because you use generate series function of PostgreSQL, right? And you use it just for a single column table. The question is like if you have 2 or more columns, it's all the same. I mean, you can use generate series, and then the generate series will supply values from one of your columns, and then you can create some other values.
Yeah, the thing is that for that, then the generate series, you put it in the from clause, and then, so for example, I can put the generate series in the from clause, put a name as an alias n, and then select n. I will just run that only the select to show what it does, and maybe with less rows to see that on the screen. So basically here, this is the number from the generate series, and I can generate other columns, for example, n plus 1, n modulo 3, and so if you put it in the from clause, then you can generate many things, or this function mentioned in the blog post to generate strings and all that. I use that a lot to generate data.
I mean, Ashwar, I discovered this function just a year ago when I joined YugabyteDB. But Franck, as a veteran of the databases, knew about it for a long time, and it's a beautiful tool. If you work with Postgres or with Postgres compliant databases such as YugabyteDB, it's just an easy way to generate the data. It's like in the generate series, the generate series function will be executed a number of times as the number, like the second argument, right, that is passed to that function, and then you can just initialize your strings. You can string columns, your numeric columns, etc.
Also timestamp, I don't use that a lot. I don't even know how it works, but usually from the number I convert to timestamp. But
okay, so Franck, let's wrap up with the core database changes, and we have a few thoughts by Pete. Pete, we remember about you. It's like even though I'm showing your comment right now, I was waiting for the best time. So there, the comment is that when you were talking, Franck, about the collocation, Pete's opinion is that that would be a bad default. The default in YugabyteDB, just to prevent creating one table for every table, make people think about which tables are big and which tables are just tables.
Yeah, the problem with defaults is that people use the database for different things. A new development for microservices, probably the default of non-collocating, so distributing everything, and hash sharding is probably okay because this is how they think the microservice. If you build something like a bank application or the things that we are used to do on relational databases, then probably it's better to be ready to distribute later, but collocate at the beginning.
And Pete's assumption is that most applications have many small tables and only few big tables. I don't know, depends, probably depends. Certainly, I saw a lot when there is a mix, you have some really big and fat tables sometimes.
There's also something we can mention. I think the goal with a few features that will come, I think the goal will be to start collocated and then move to distributing other tables, doing that online, and having also recommendation about which table needs to be distributed. And maybe you want to discuss about the performance advisor, and this is the kind of thing that a performance advisor can do, telling you this table is a hotspot. It's good to distribute it.
Yeah. So let's review the other changes that are related to the Kubernetes ecosystem and their performance. But in the meantime, we are happy because Pete managed to find the Docker image for this release. Pete, please spend some time giving it a try and let us know what's your thinking like. We'll be glad to hear your feedback. So yeah, let's let me share the screen right now. So to present, share screen, and we are doing this screen. So first, we are carrying on with this article. There are changes in YugabyteDB 2.18th release. That's a massive release, folks. A lot of changes. So I will let Franck discuss the core database changes. So what we else have, there is 5 or even more changes that are related to Kubernetes ecosystem and to YugabyteDB Anywhere. So what's YugabyteDB Anywhere? You have YugabyteDB Open Source and YugabyteDB Anywhere. I'm thinking about is as a management plane, management platform, control panel that allows you to deploy YugabyteDB easily in various hybrid environments or cloud environments, private data centers, and then you can, upgrade easily, take backups, etc. Think about some management panel with their UI. So what we have here? First, there is support for Mirantis Kubernetes engine. If you're using YugabyteDB there, you should enjoy this improvement. Then also we introduced, so right now we run a special YugabyteDB controller in the Kubernetes, in each Kubernetes pod that also runs an instance of your YugabyteDB node. And with the help of that change, we can do backups and restore procedures 5x times faster. Okay, so those of you who manage their YugabyteDB deployments in Kubernetes also should enjoy this setting. So also there are some of the simplifications or DevOps experience related changes, like non-root support, shared namespaces across YugabyteDB clusters, etc., etc. My 2 favorite features, though, is the first one is now you can easily, with YugabyteDB Anywhere, deploy your multiple standalone YugabyteDB clusters and then set up asynchronous replication. We call it X-cluster replication. And the other one is, that those of you who use Kubernetes, that in Kubernetes, you usually deploy a single Kubernetes cluster within a single private data center or within a single availability zone. If you want to deploy, let's say, Kubernetes across multiple availability zones or regions, then you need to use some external component so that each cluster, each node from each availability zone can communicate to each other. And with this release, we supported the multi-cluster services API that will let you to deploy YugabyteDB nodes. That's a single cluster. You can deploy a single cluster across multiple cloud regions, and all of those nodes will be able to communicate to each other with the help of this multi-cluster service API. So how it looks, this is my UI. This is YugabyteDB Anywhere instance that runs on my machine. So let me do this. No, I'm increasing the wrong screen. Yeah, this way. So I've created, let's say, this configuration for Kubernetes, and I'm saying that I'm going to deploy my cluster in several zones, in several regions in the United States. And then when I deploy this cluster, I can easily, let's say, select in this provider. I'm saying this is my Kubernetes engine cluster in Google Cloud Platform. And then I can say that I want to have nodes in US East, North Virginia. Then I have a node in Ohio, also US East, and then I want to have another node in US South. So this is what you can do. You just continue, finish this configuration, you click next, and you will have a cluster running across multiple regions in Kubernetes. So this is what we added. When it comes to other changes unrelated to Kubernetes and core database engine, we have also Performance Advisor. We have Terraform providers so that you can easily, let's say, manage and orchestrate your deployments through Terraform. And I like this one, Performance Advisor. That's actually a tool that allows that monitors the state of your cluster, and then you can see if you need to introduce any optimizations. So this right now, this is also supported for YugabyteDB Anywhere, but also initially it was introduced to YugabyteDB Managed. And let me show you how it works in YugabyteDB Managed. I have a sample workload.
And I can mention that the idea of the Performance Advisor, we will add more and more recommendation coming also from the feedback from users. What can be useful to recommend, looking at the possible indexes that can be added to make some queries faster, or looking at some indexes that are not used and that can be dropped, or which table can be partitioned or not. There are a lot of things that can be done with this advisor that looks at the workload and gives some recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. And I decided to give a try. I have a sample application. It's called Market Orders application. It basically generates stock purchases. You have New York Stock Exchange, you have London Stock Exchange. People buy stocks, sell stocks, and this is actually what this application does. You have a few stocks like from Google, Apple, etc., and the application generates and stores all these stocks in YugabyteDB. And I ran the Performance Advisor for that. So right now the application is connected. This is my cluster in YugabyteDB Managed. You see the workload, and under the Performance tab, I have the Performance Advisor. And let's scan it. You do the scan. Usually the advice is to run your workload for at least 1 hour. Yeah, so here is what we see, that I have an index. I created a secondary index, and that index is not used by my queries. So what queries I run, for instance, let's take a look at slow queries.
Basically, the slow queries and the statistics that the advisor is based on is mostly pgstat statements that gather statistics about all statements running.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you keep running, I mean, you can see some other issues such as CPU skew usage or load skew usage when, let's say, one of the nodes gets most of the traffic or most of the queries, and that would help you, let's say, for instance, with this optimization, probably I need to drop this index because right now the application doesn't use this bid price column. That's the column of this table, one of the tables. So this is my tables. And yeah, I think that this is what, this is the table. trade, and inside of this trade table, I have that column. So, and I indexed that column. I don't use it yet. So this is probably a good advice for me. If you're not planning to use, just drop the index, because the index is also data structure. It will, every time you update or insert, etc., the index is going to be updated. So you probably don't need to have it. All right.
Of course, those are recommendations. We do not drop indexes because you know your application. Maybe you know that in the next release you will query on this one. So the idea is that you look at the recommendation and then implement them or not. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So, and having said that, man, we are already running out of time. It's 50 minutes since we started the streaming. We need to wrap up. Thanks to all of you who came and asked questions. And get ready for the next episode. The next episode will take place in 2 weeks on June 14th. It's the same time and the same place. We will announce there. We will schedule everything the next week. So what you need to do, just follow us on LinkedIn, on Twitch, on YouTube, and you will get notification as soon as the next episode is scheduled. So, Franck, any closing remarks from you?
I put the link to the community page where we have the Slack channel, the GitHub, and all that. So all feedback is welcome about the product, about what we do there in those open community hours. Yeah, the goal is to get feedback, and this format with the chat, the goal is really to have feedback and have communication with the community. The thing also is that Denis and I, we go a lot to conferences and we meet people there, but not all users are going to conferences because depending on the country where you live, it can be easier or not to travel, depending on the family, depending all that. So that's another channel that can be easier for many people.
Exactly. And sometimes, and folks, we know, Franck and I, we know each other for more than a year, but we've never met.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though we go to conferences, I usually travel in North America. Franck, mostly goes to European tech events, but hope in the future our roads will intersect and we will be streaming an episode of the community hours together from the same location during one of the major conferences. I hope that will happen.
We need to do that this year. Yeah.
Yep. And thanks a lot, Pete. Thanks a lot for your questions, for your remarks, and for your suggestions. And thanks everyone who joined us. And we'll see you in 2 weeks from now. Bye-bye.
Bye.